Why don't we get started? Hi, everybody.
Hi.
So, a show near and dear to my heart, as I said in my email, a program of Mozart wind pieces. Um, as you can hear from the show tonight, his skill in writing for wind instruments was just impeccable, just absolutely impeccable. You can look to the symphonies and the piano concerti as well. The wind writing is just it's remarkable. Mozart was a master of wind writing, but he associated himself, as with others. We've talked about Brahms in the past with Richard Mühlfeld. He latched on to some talented players and was inspired by their playing to compose for them. And the first work that we heard tonight, the Oboe Quartet, does everybody know the Oboe Quartet? We heard the Oboe Quartet. The Oboe Quartet is done. I mean, it's as you could, I mean, it's a really, really, really lovely piece. I mean, it's very, very I always charming is always the word that comes to me with the Mozart. But it's just wonderful. It's just a buoyant work and beautiful. So he meets this oboist Friedrich Rahm in Mannheim when he is sent off by Leopold to find a job. He's in Mannheim and he hears Friedrich Rahm and just fell in love with him in Mannheim. And he was so taken with him that he had previously written an oboe concerto for an Italian oboist, but he gave the piece to Rahm, and he said that it became Rahm's warhorse, that Rahm played it everywhere. And when the piece was eventually published, he dedicated it to Rahm. So he had written it for the Italian oboist, but he was so taken by Rahm's playing that he actually dedicated the piece to Rahm. So he goes, and I have a quote here from Mannheim. I don't want to skip over it. This is Mozart when he first met Rahm. He says, Rahm is a good, jolly, worthy man, about 35, who has traveled a great deal, so has much experience. So he was taken by the older man, 35, of Rahm, and so he leaves. He goes to Paris after Mannheim. And then a few years later, he gets a commission to write Idomeneo and goes to Munich and finds that after Rahm's time in Mannheim and playing in that famous orchestra, that he was brought to Munich and played principal oboe in the Munich orchestra. So in writing Idomeneo in Munich, he was so inspired by Rahm. He just adored him and incorporated all these really wonderful, especially there's a soprano aria in Idomeneo for basically a concertante wind quartet that's really, really incredible that he wrote for Rahm. And I have another quote from Mozart in Munich about Rahm, and he was writing his father, Leopold. He said, when you know him, you will find Rahm a true German, saying exactly what he thinks to your face. He said to me, quote, I must honestly confess that no music has ever made such an impression on me. And I assure you, I thought of your father 50 times at least, and the joy that he will feel when he hears this opera. So he played up to Mozart. So Idomeneo has this, fantastic success in Munich. And before Mozart leaves Munich, he writes this oboe quartet. And you could tell in the writing, the part is written in a very high register in general. The piece sits very high in the oboe range. And this is because Rahm's playing was especially suited in the high register. And he tailored the piece to Rahm's qualities of his playing. And I have a piece he had written the year before. The Oboe Quartet was written in 1780, and he wrote a concert aria in 1779 called Popoli di Tessalia, and that's K316. And it has a very prominent oboe part that goes up to a high D, which is very high in the oboe register. So in this piece, and Rahm played it, and he played it very well. So he writes the Oboe Quartet the year after, and he goes even further and writes a high F in the part, which has never been done before, and Mozart had never done it since. And so it became sort of Rahm's signature piece because he was one of the few people that could play that note, that he could play that high. So yeah, it's a really, really wonderful piece. And what did you think of the performance of Gareth Hulse?
They were great.
He was terrific.
Yeah.
Really tasteful, really, really lovely and tasteful.
Say it again.
I played the oboe, but not like him. Nowhere near him. No, I'm not all high F.
No.
No.
I mean, you know, I remember hearing this piece for the first time as a teenager and just astounded. Even the last, it goes in the second movement, the last notes, it goes bum, bum,
That's right.
bum, like way up there. And it's just, you know, I was just stunned by it, by the writing. It's quite remarkable. I thought the performance was wonderful, really, really wonderful.
Outstanding.
And his playing, I have to say, I was not familiar with. I'm not too familiar with his playing, and I really, really appreciated it. And then, of course, we come to the Horn Quintet. And I may have a few things to say about the Horn Quintet.
Good shot.
But you know, Leutgeb is this character in Mozart's life. You know, Mozart met him as a child, and he was already a prominent horn player. The first mention of Leutgeb is in a writing, a letter of Karl Ditters von Dittersdorf, writing about Leutgeb playing in the Vienna court, and he had this very friendly and teasing relationship with Mozart. I mean, they were very, very, very close. And actually, in the last letter that he wrote in his life, he wrote about Leutgeb retiring from the horn in his very last letter, which I thought was really wonderful. And you know, he also had this side gig as a cheesemonger in Vienna. You know, so he was like, you know, he played the horn around, and you know, the opportunities, and still opportunities for horn players are few and far between. But he sold cheese in Vienna. It's really, really, really wonderful. But you know, and this is, I made mention, and we're going to get a little bit into it without getting too much into the weeds about the natural horn. You know, Mozart wrote this piece for him on natural horn, and the difficulty of these pieces speaks to Leutgeb's brilliance as a player. He must have been an extraordinarily brilliant player to play these pieces. But as I mentioned on the show, that Mozart would write these little notes in the horn concerti, teasing Leutgeb as he's playing, and then he would write in different colored pencils just to distract him. So he would mess up or something like that. And actually, if you ever get again to the Morgan Library, the Morgan Library houses the fourth horn concerto, the manuscript, and they bring it out, and you can see the manuscript in different colored pencil. The horn part in each bar is in a different color. It's pretty amazing. But I found this video of a horn player, Roger Montgomery, who's a horn player from the Orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment, and he's playing the rondo of the first Mozart horn concerto, and they have the score along while he's playing, and a translation of the little notes that Mozart wrote to Leutgeb. So I thought it'd be cool to see that, and I'm going to warn you all that this is a rated R video. Mozart, we'll get into it. Mozart had a very sort of scatological humor in his letters throughout his life. A little, you know, a little shady, a little dirty. So I warned you before we play the video that what Mozart was teasing Leutgeb about is a little R-rated. So here we go. This is Roger Montgomery playing with the Orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment. This is the rondo from the first horn concerto. Here we go.
Oh, he'll need it.
So Derek, how old was Mozart when this was done?
This piece was written in, I have it here, 56, 26, 26, 27.
Talking like a six-year-old.
Yes. Yeah.
But was he writing in Italian? It seemed to be Italian.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But you see the humor. I mean, and the closeness. And he has, this doesn't happen in other manuscripts. It's only with Leutgeb. And it happens again and again in the concerti. It's so, you know, it's fascinating. It's really, really just wonderful.
Mm.
Really.
You mean he never did it again with any other?
He didn't. It was to my knowledge. I mean, I believe that Leutgeb, it was the only relationship that he was close enough to do this. You know,
Oh.
in the music. Yeah, in the music.
Yeah.
I mean, it's wonderful. Yeah, and speaks to the closeness. And they apparently just had this very teasing relationship. They would tease each other mercilessly. So, really lovely. Now, did anyone notice anything peculiar about the horn playing?
Well, it's pretty neat. It's pretty good for a natural horn.
For a natural horn, and that's what I'm sort of getting at.
Yeah.
So this piece, so he played it, you know, this is on a natural horn, and a natural horn has no valves. And you know, I could speak to you for hours about, you know, the concept of valveless horns and with valves, without valves, and the overtone series and all of these things. But interestingly enough, I found a little video, because a lot of people wonder about horn playing in general and natural horn especially, and why do you put your hand in the bell and things of that nature of a French horn. So I have a little tutorial video, actually, of about 4 minutes long, of Roger Montgomery from the Orchestra of Age of Enlightenment that illuminates the difficulty of playing the natural horn and why you hear those funny sounding notes in the middle of the music. So bear with me. I thought it would be interesting to just give you a little insight into what makes a natural horn and the difference of a natural horn sound to the horn that you hear, the modern horn in the orchestra of today. So let's give a listen to this.
In the latter part of the 18th century, when Mozart wrote his horn concertos for his lifelong friend Joseph Leutgeb, the horn had changed considerably from how it had been at the beginning of the century. The Baroque horn, from the early part of the century, tended to be made in one loop, in one fixed key. It had a small bell, was played with the hand out of the bell, and the notes that were available to the player tended to lie very high up. As the harmonics got closer together, high up, that's where they all were in order to be able to play tunes. And with minimal adjustment, either with the hand or the lip, it was possible to get a reasonable series of notes out. Now, this all began to change around the middle of the 18th century, and horns started to develop. The bells became bigger, and the hand was often put in the bell, but more of that later. They started appearing with tuning slides, so it was easier to adjust the pitch to play with other instruments. And one of the other big changes was that they were made much more often with terminal crooks, that's to say, a lead pipe of varying length, which could be put on at the beginning of the horn and would make it play in different keys. Now, these changes began to be reflected in the kind of music that composers wrote for the horn. Initially, there was no need to make very many adjustments. The use of the hand in the bell allowed not only subtle tuning differences, but it meant that certain notes which were very intransigent could be brought better into tune by either covering with the hand or taking the hand out of the bell. But most significantly, it was possible, by moving the hand around, to open up the middle register of the horn, which is something that hadn't been done before. Really, in the middle octave of the horn, there are only 4 available notes on the open pitches, and now by moving the hand around, it is possible to gain a fully chromatic octave. Although this was quite an innovation for the horn, being able to play in the middle register more fully now, it also created slight problems of timbre, because the notes which are played with the hand are either more covered and stopped, sometimes quite nasal, and the ones which played with the hand more out of the bell are very much more boomy and stick out. So the big problem for both composer and performer is how to integrate these very different flavoured notes into something that is still satisfying musically. This is a copy made by John Webb of a Bohemian instrument from around 1800 by Franz Storr. It's possible that it may be a little bit later and more developed than the one which Leutgeb, the original performer, used. We don't know. The horn was in such a varied state of development that it's very difficult to say with any certainty whether he would have been at the forefront of instrumental development or would have been reactionary, but it's possible that he might have played it on a slightly smaller instrument, maybe even without a tuning slide. I'm afraid we just don't know. However, we can say with certainty that this was the type of instrument that Mozart was writing for, a natural instrument without valves, where the player has to achieve the notes written in the part by manipulating the hand in the bell, producing lots of different tones.
Very interesting.
So Derek, how many times have you played the natural horn?
There are pieces, there's a piece by Paul Dukas called Villanelle, which he wrote as a final exam at the Paris Conservatoire, that utilizes natural horn playing. But really, we're all playing natural horn. So, you know, when he takes that crook off, you see him take that pipe off. Each length of pipe, when you have different lengths of pipe, it creates different keys. So a natural horn player will have all those different, what's known as crooks, these lengths of pipe, and they carry it around. And if they put in the E flat major, they'll put in that one, or D major, they'll put in that one, and that's how it works. And and you adjust pitch with not only the hand, but your buzzing of your lips, where you and change pitches like that. So it's quite challenging. You can imagine these horn concerti, and most of us know the Mozart horn concerti. They're very popular works, and it speaks to Leutgeb's mastery to play these very, very, very difficult works on these horns. And when you hear, especially in the Baroque period, you hear, like, for instance, the Brandenburg First Concerto, which has the two horns, and they're often pitched very high up in the horn range. And that's because of the overtone series. There are more available notes the higher you go up in the range. So that's why older Baroque horn playing is way up high, because that's where all the pitches are. They didn't utilize, this hand stopping in the Baroque period to achieve those middle range notes. It's interesting, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
The first valved horns introduced?
1814. And the first major piece for valved horn was by Robert Schumann, the Concertstück for four horns and orchestra, which was basically a showpiece for the valved horn. And I don't know the year of that piece, I should, but it's a very difficult piece to play. Solo four horns and orchestra. Yeah. But it's wonderful. And oftentimes in classical periods, let's say symphonies, you'll have a symphony in D. And then the first symphony you'll have the crook in for D major. And then the second movement will often be in the either the subdominant or the dominant, or G or A. So the horn players would have to take out the crook, put it to the side, put in the other crook, and play that movement on the new instrument. And then in the third movement, in the minuet or the scherzo, they put it back in, take it out, put the other one back in, and then go like that. So
So how many did they have to carry around?
depending on how much you're playing, if you have a complete natural horn case, they're rather large, actually, rather large to accommodate all the crooks.
So-
The same thing was happening with trumpets during the 19th century, the development of rotary valves and piston valves. What's amazing to me is that a lot of European orchestras were still using natural horns well into the 19th century.
Well, Gary, it's actually sometimes I think maybe you're speaking about the Viennese horn, which is not a natural horn, and it's quite different.
Oh, I'm sorry. When I said horns, I meant other brass instruments.
Oh, brass instruments, yes.
Yeah.
And you'll see also,
it took a while to integrate valved instruments into the orchestras.
And also you'll see in brass playing in European orchestras, and it's actually coming over to the States in certain repertoire where trumpets will be rotary trumpets instead of valve trumpets. And it's because it's a larger bore, darker sound. Yeah, it's a darker sound on the trumpet. So who knew all this thing about brass playing? Who knew?
Who knew? I had no idea.
Who wants to know?
Who wants to know? Gary and I will just geek out all night on brass, the development of brass instruments and everything.
What the horn player just now didn't, when he separated the whole thing, the whole first couple coils came off.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the
Was that for pitch change also?
Yes,
or-
that's the crook. So horn players would take out that entire piece.
I thought the crook was the U-shaped thing that.
No.
Oh,
No,
okay.
it's that. So it's physics. So the length of pipe has to do with the overtone series of the pitches that you're coming. Yeah. So you're changing that length of pipe. And when valves came in, that's all it does. The valve just changes the length of pipe when you press the valve down.
Okay.
Yeah, it made it all a one-stop shop with the valve.
So how important is the hand for modern horn playing?
Very, very important for tone quality, for intonation.
Mhm.
It's always important. Yeah. And there's a technique called stopped playing where actually composers will write that buzzing nasal sound. That's called stopped playing, where you're fully stopping the horn. The famous one is the Tchaikovsky's Sixth Symphony in the last movement. Dee da 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 dee dum ba. Dee da 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 dee da ba. It's an F sharp, yeah. So it happens a lot. It happens a lot.
And then there's a moment, I don't want to take too much time, but in the Mahler Second Symphony, where he has the horns raise them
Yes.
way up high.
Yes.
I don't think they can get their hands in then.
No, and actually, it's the end of the first symphony is supposed to do that, but it happens in the second symphony as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, I digress.
Yes. Interesting.
So we get to the C-minor Serenade, and I have to say that the Mozart C-minor Serenade is truly one of my all-time favorite pieces of anything. It's such an incredible and strange piece that he would cast this supposed serenade in such a dark key. Then I have a quote from the musicologist Peter Locke, who's at Bard, and he says, "Serenades are not usually written in C minor. A serenade in C minor is even something of a contradiction in terms, given the lighthearted nature of the genre, usually destined for some type of festive celebratory occasion, and the dark, even tragic connotations carried by the minor mode and C minor in particular. Yet Mozart would not let his imagination be restricted by such considerations, and he attempted a bold stylistic crossover with this wind octet, an ambitious work written for the Harmonie Musik or wind ensemble at the court of Emperor Joseph II. So to have this, a serenade is for a party at night, very light music, and here's Mozart trying to get a commission from the emperor, trying to appease the emperor, and he's like, I'll write a wind octet for the emperor's band, and he gives this. I mean, it's really, really wonderful. And, even the typical serenade is cast in multi-movements, usually 6 movements. And here's this movement in only 4 movements. It speaks like it's almost like a symphony. It's almost like a symphony, and of that same import. And, he also later, importantly, chose this serenade. He arranged it for viola quintet. Do we know the string version of this piece?
That's right. I totally forgot about that.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's an abomination.
Yeah.
I always cringe when I hear it. I honestly cringe when I hear it.
We always say it's much better as a viola quintet. That's right.
Yeah, it speaks to my bias. It has nothing to do with anything. So it just speaks to my bias. But but of the serenades and any or even the divertimenti that he wrote, he wanted this one to transcribe, which I think lays some additional importance into this work in Mozart's catalog. So typically, he starts just like a symphony. He's got the sonata allegro movement in the first movement. He's got the slow movement in the second movement. And with the minuetto, it's this very declamatory minuetto that's also written in canon, in the minuetto section and in the trio section. He writes it in canon. And then he goes in the fourth movement with the theme and variations in the fourth movement, which is not unusual. But he's got contrast. There are some variations in major, but it's distinctly minor. But he figures at the end, I should really brighten this up and end it on an up note. And he ends it in C major instead of C minor, just to say, okay, yeah, it's a serenade. So
Derek, how many themes and variations did Mozart do? I think of Beethoven, but I don't think of.
Yeah, you're right. That's a great question. That's a great question, John.
It just doesn't strike me as something that he did very often.
He didn't do it. You're right. He didn't do it that often. And nowhere near what Beethoven did. You're absolutely right. Yeah, I'll look into that. That's a great question. I'm trying to think of one.
Maybe the has.
Twinkle Twinkle. I mean, I forget the actual name of it, but it's the Twinkle Twinkle. Oh boy. Very nice.
That's very funny. Yes. But that's a great point. That's a great point, John. But what'd you think of the performance?
It's terrific.
I thought this was a terrific performance. Really terrific.
All virtuosos. I mean, it was incredible.
Yeah. I mean, this is back in the day. The Chamber Orchestra of Europe is a really it's a very tight band. I mean, it's a really great ensemble. And there's a lot of, when I've seen it recently, a lot of younger people in it. So I doubt, I don't know if there's still, some of these wind players are still playing in the group, but I thought it was a remarkable performance. I had some quibble with some of the interpretations that they were doing, but the playing was really fantastic. I thought it was really, really well done, really wonderful. But I thought that maybe we should play a normal one, a normal serenade. So, you know, Mozart for winds, he's got the E flat major serenade, which is number 11, and that's a very lovely lovely piece that's quite overshadowed by the C minor and quite overshadowed by the piece that I'm going to play, which is the Grand Partita. The Grand Partita of Mozart, which is the 12th serenade, it's larger score. It's scored for 13 winds. It includes basset horns. He even adds a double bass to give it a little oomph in the low register, because there wasn't a lot of contrabassoon back then. But it's almost an hour long, the Grand Partita, and it's really truly one of his great works. Truly one of Mozart's great works, but more suited for a serenade than this piece. But I thought I would play the Adagio Movement, which is about 5 minutes long, and it's members of the Concertgebouw Orchestra doing the Adagio Movement from Mozart's Grand Partita. Here we go.
Wow. Derek, you got that off Facebook?
YouTube.
YouTube?
Yeah. Listen to the whole thing.
Yeah, well, I will. I definitely will.
Derek,
Yeah.
were the clarinetists playing? Were they playing real basset horns, or were they playing alto clarinets?
Those looked like basset horns.
They did.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell.
Yeah. So the basset horn for those, it's just a longer clarinet and plays it. The range is a little lower.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have the big bell on the bottom.
Right. Right.
Okay.
But I mean, you hear the mastery of the writing.
Incredible.
You know, he gives you this sort of the feeling of motion with the syncopation that's underlying all of it, and it's constant, that syncopation over these long, beautiful lines that are being passed throughout the instruments.
This pulsing is amazing.
You know, it's really, it's almost as if the soloists are floating, that they're just floating on top of this texture. It's really, yeah. I mean, you see it, the wind writing is perfect. I mean, it's perfect. It's just, yeah, it's perfect. You know, we'll close it out tonight, but we skipped one aspect of his wind writing. Can anybody tell me? In his career,
Flute concerto?
or maybe a specific instrument?
Flute.
Flute, yes, but to a lesser degree. He famously did not like the flute.
You're talking about clarinet. Yeah.
I'm talking about clarinets.
Yeah.
So toward the end of Mozart's life, he encountered a clarinetist named Anton Stadler.
Yeah.
Very late, and he wrote, these late masterworks: the Clarinet Concerto, the Clarinet Quintet, and to a lesser degree the Kegelstadt Trio. And we didn't have performances of the Clarinet Quintet, and sure, I wanted to make mention of it because the omission of it is glaring to me. Because those late clarinet works, just like Brahms, I mean, they are true masterworks of any repertoire. They're incredible works. If you don't know the Mozart Clarinet Quintet, you should go and listen to the Mozart Clarinet Quintet. It's
particularly the writing for clarinet and strings, which is just beautiful.
Yeah, it's wonderful. But I just wanted to make mention of it, that I would not skip over the clarinet in Mozart's life, because that is vitally important. We just didn't have a performance of it. So anyway, does any other questions about his wind writing or anything about tonight?
There's just something very special that stands out from the rest of his work, about this winds. And
William, they're overlooked. The octets, they're hard to organize. I mean, frankly, they're expensive. Like, for me to do them, it's expensive. To bring up 8 wind players and to do this. That doesn't mean I shouldn't, and that's, but they're never done. I can tell you that when I was in school, we would get a bunch of friends together and go, and we would play at rush hour in Grand Central Station. Mm-hmm. And we would play Mozart serenades.
People would be just stopped in their tracks
and put a hat out, and we'd all make, like at the end of the night, $1.50.
But you moved hearts,
but just the opportunity to play them, and to experience them. They're wonderful works, especially the Grand Partita. It's not done that often. It's usually done in the context of an orchestral wind section, because it's just hard to gather people together to do it.
Yeah, I think that's why Wuhan, when she brings the Chamber Music Society Lincoln Center, when the Philadelphia Orchestra is there at the same time, that's when she takes advantage of that to put together those kinds of groups. So otherwise, there's no chance to do it.
There's no chance to do it. That's right. That's right.
Need a chord orchestra.
Yeah, it's just, it's just, and rehearsal, rehearsal time, getting people together and getting them up here. I don't want to get into figures, but it would be an expensive proposition to do it.
Plus you need players of the highest quality.
And this is what, and people who are going to rehearse.
That's right.
Because this is, again, these serenades are often, they get one rehearsal and then they're performed.
Yeah.
And
and if they're not technically perfect.
And technically perfect. I can go on and on about that, but it's just a commitment and to the beauty of these masterworks, and that's kind of more my interest than perfection. But that's the thing, And the problem with wind playing is that you have such a dearth of repertoire that you've played it. You've played this since you were 14. You've done this, and it's not, it's not like I don't want to say it's not a challenge, but it's, famously the Mozart Piano Wind Quintet, which is really one of his chamber music masterpieces. It's such a great piece. And you get wind players to rehearse that, and they're like, I did this when I was 14. I don't want to, I don't want to do 3 rehearsals on this in a concert.
Mm-hmm.
And that's showbiz. I mean, that's kind of the challenge. That's the challenge.
Are you saying that we are never going to see a octet at the new chapel when you guys open up again?
Well, I mean, I'd never say never. It's just it's just do re mi. I mean, it's an expensive proposition. I would love nothing. I would love nothing more to do things like and we will. Well, maybe we'll have the capacity to do these things, but it's challenging. It's challenging. But goodness, an evening of Mozart octets, Mozart wind octets. I mean, it's fantastic and different,
Yes.
right? Like you said, they stand alone. I mean, they stand. It's like a separate sort of little jewel in his catalog. Yeah.
Golden crown.
Yeah. But get to know them. And it's easy. They're so easy and wonderful to listen to. The E flat major serenade is a lovely piece, and it's never done. It's a lovely piece. Lovely.
A major serenade.
Yeah. So, anyway, any other questions? All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Derek.
I'll mention again, Friday night, 7:00. This link I unveil next season, our 50th anniversary season. And I'll really try not to keep it 3 hours long or like the Oscars or something, but no, we'll keep it very tight. And then if you can't join us on Friday night, then we'll see you here next Monday. Okay.
Okay.
Terrific.
Great.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
There's that famous